All right, everybody, welcome to day 2 of Elevate Aviation's cross-country tour. Elevate is a nonprofit organization that helps women, youth, and underrepresented groups thrive and succeed in careers in aviation. Elevate Aviation has programs all across Canada to help people get educated about careers in aviation. For more information, please check out our website at www.elevateaviation.ca. This cross-country tour started back in 2015 to showcase the many careers and paths one could take to join the aviation industry. This year, we're excited to present our tour virtually, so I hope you guys enjoy the presentation. I'm super excited with the panel that we have today. This is my first time hosting, so it's a little different for me, but I'm really excited. We have some really cool women here today to talk about some really awesome careers. So without further ado, well, let's get started and meet our fantastic panel. Rumbi, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Hi, my name is Rumbi, and I'm an aerospace engineer working in aircraft certification at Transport Canada. Thank you for having me on and inviting me to share my career and to be on this panel with Amanda and Alida. It's really fun.
Amanda?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Captain Amanda Cook. I am an aerospace engineering officer on the Canadian Forces F-18, as everyone knows it. I currently work at the Fighter Operational Test and Evaluation Flight. We are a Lodger unit to 410 Squadron in Cold Lake, Alberta, but we belong to 434 Squadron of the Rock. I'm super excited to be here today. I'm very passionate about what I do in engineering and aviation and aerospace, and I love to be able to share that with people around me because I feel that even though we are getting closer to having gender equality across the workspaces, I find that a lot of people still feel that careers in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and mechanical and medicine, I find that a lot of people still don't feel that those are the jobs for them. So I love to show that, yes, you can, and I'm just super honored to be here today to talk about what I do.
All right, and Alida.
Hi everybody, Captain Alida Ryan here. I'm currently situated in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. It is -30 out. It's cold. And then when it gets to -20, you're like, oh, it's actually warm out. Anyway, so I work out of JTFN headquarters, Joint Task Force North, and the ACE cell, which is the Air Coordination Cell. We coordinate operations in the north. We write lift messages for the Twin Otter, and we charter rangers all across the northern Canada. And I'm very excited to be here and share some insight and my kind of story with everybody here.
Wow, those are really incredible career paths. For those of our viewers watching who may be interested in something like that, maybe you guys could walk us through kind of how we get to where you are, kind of the education route that you may take to get into these kind of careers. Rumbi?
So I went to university and took aerospace engineering. I took it at Carleton University in Ottawa. And as part of the program, I signed up for a co-op, which took 1 year after between your third and fourth year of academic. And at that point, I managed to get a co-op position with Perimeter Aviation in Winnipeg, and they fly small and medium aircraft like Metros and Dash 8, flying mostly to northern Manitoba and northern Ontario. And that was a really cool introduction for me to the space of aircraft certification, because when you have an aircraft, you know, it leaves the factory at Bombardier, Boeing, Airbus, but that's not the end of sort of its design. There's a lot of stuff that happens to an aircraft after, because airlines, operators, everybody wants to make their aircraft suit their mission better. So through that job, I got to work on like otters that had floats where we were strapping canoes and boats and lumber and ladders onto them. And then I also got to work on medevac aircraft where we were figuring out how to put a stretcher into the aircraft because the airplanes were flying medevac for communities up north, to working on just the Dash 8s that were flying regular passengers. So there's a lot of different roles that aircraft fulfill, especially in Canada. It's really important. So it's kind of cool to have that as a first co-op job. Once I did went back to school. I graduated. I went back to the same place that I did my co-op. They were like, hey, you seem to like this stuff, so come back and work this. So I worked with them for a few years before going on to do consulting with a couple of independent delegates who sign approvals on behalf of Transport Canada. So whenever you change something in an airplane, you can't just, it's not like in a car where you could be like, oh, I want to change this radio out for this one or this touchscreen out for this one. You can't just, it's not a plug and play. There's a lot of safety regulations, a lot of thinking, a lot of analysis, and a lot of reports that go into proving that, yes, what we're putting into the airplane is safe, it can be operated, it can be maintained. And so there's a system for a delegation where people who are who have experience in that area can find stuff on behalf of transport. So I was working with a few of those independent delegates. After that, I went to Jazz Aviation, who flies Air Canada Express. So if you've ever flown with Air Canada and you were on a CRJ or a Dash 8, those were Jazz flights. And that was really cool because they were bigger airplanes than what I'd previously worked on, and learning how an airline uses their airplane. When they have such a large fleet, there's a lot that goes into trying to make sure that the airplanes all operate the same. They can be maintained, so we'd make sure that we do modifications to the aircraft so that if a pilot walked onto one airplane and then walked off and walked onto another airplane, they were, similar enough that it wouldn't be like, whose airplane is this? Which is pretty cool. And then at the end of last year, I started working for Transport Canada in aircraft certification as a regional engineer in the Atlantic region. So I get to work on whatever airplanes, helicopters, theoretically balloons. I haven't gotten the balloon project yet, but I'm hoping anything that's in the Atlantic region.
Wow, that is like incredibly cool. Like I'm kind of fangirling over here hearing this. Like that's amazing. How about the rest of you guys? How have you guys gotten into your career paths?
Well, me, I knew from a very early age that I wanted to have a career in the aerospace industry. Like most kids, I dreamed of being an astronaut, but that was a dream that I never grew out of. And I started formulating at a very young age that in order to be an astronaut, I'd have to do some kind of science or engineering background in order to get there. And I'd have to work in a test and evaluation set to prove that I can think outside of the box and work in high stress environments. So, as much as I wanted to be that engineer slash paleontologist slash oceanographer, who's also an astronaut, I knew that I needed to kind of taper down my focus and figure out what I wanted to do. So going out of high school, I knew exactly where I wanted to go. I knew that the military was going to be able to give me that career path that I wanted in test and evaluation. On civilian street, it's very difficult to get into that kind of field. You end up having to kind of hope that you'll have a company take you on and like sponsor you to go to university in test and evaluation school. If not, you're paying for yourself and the price tag is very high. And it's hard and very difficult and very competitive in order to get in. So I knew the military had specific positions dedicated to test and evaluation. So those are the fighter operational test and evaluation flight, where I have the amazing privilege to work right now, as well as the Aerospace Engineering Test Establishment, also known as AT, and they do a lot of developmental and experimental test and evaluation engineering projects. So starting out the gate from high school, I knew that the military was the job for me. So I started applying at a recruiting center, and I had the option of going to either civilian university or RMC. So I ended up choosing to go to civilian university. I ended up going to Ryerson University, a sister university to Carleton, and Rumbi went to Carleton. Engineers! So I had a lot of fun because I was like half in, half out. I was able to enjoy my time studying with friends in a very diverse group downtown Toronto, but I was still knowing that, hey, like there is a purpose to this. I'm not just here just to party. Like I'm being paid to go to civilian university and my school is getting covered so that I can learn everything that I need to learn to become an aerospace engineer, and I can be the best possible engineering in training when I finally get my chance to show up to the to where I wanted to go and practice engineering as an on-the-job trainee. So didn't exactly go as I had planned. The military, when you do sign up, they don't always put you where you want to go. So at that time in 2009, I ended up getting slated into air traffic control. Now for me, I'm very meticulous and I would say perfectionist. And an air traffic controlling position where you need to be able to make split-second decisions that are the right decisions, I knew right out the gate that while it is an amazing career path, that was not the career path for me. So I ended up having to take 5 years while I was going to university to find ways to navigate the voluntary occupational transfer system so that I could go from being an air traffic controller, or an aerospace controller as we call it in the military, and into aerospace engineering. So finally, upon graduation from Ryerson University, I got posted to Cold Lake. I met up with a base personnel selections officer, and he's like, you're absolutely right, Amanda. You're about to go on course in Cornwall. I can see that like you're very stressed out and this may not be the best career path for you. Where do you want to go? And it just so happened that there was an opening for aerospace engineering. And so I was able to take that, and I had all of the prerequisite training. And then from there, I started my on-the-job training package while I was working in Cold Lake. And I've been able to see and do so many different things in my trade outside of the test and evaluation cell. So everything gets broken down into first line, second line, and support trades when you're working as an aerospace engineer in the military. So I did a lot of maintenance management. And so there's a lot of project management that you end up doing without actually touching projects per se, but you are responsible for making sure that the technicians working on the aircraft are safe. And you're also responsible for making sure that we are meeting our maintenance timelines and guidelines as per the maintenance programs for these aircraft. So that was a really good start out job. I got to learn all of the ins and outs of the F-18s, and I was able to ask so many questions of everyone that I worked with, from the new technicians that had just received their level A's or their journeyman qualifications on Civvy Street, to the more senior air maintenance supervisors or superintendents that are the rank of warrant and above. And I've learned so much, and working with these individuals have helped me to gain the experience that I needed, that I feel makes me a huge asset to the fighter operational test and evaluation flight right now. So getting into the T&E world, operational test and evaluation is the final step before a new software or a new piece of hardware can be employed on an everyday basis on these aircraft. So it's kind of like what Rumbi was doing with her technical airworthiness authorizations on Civvy side. We just aren't working with equipment that has already been certified and making sure that we're following the blueprint to make sure that it's properly certified and safe. We are creating the blueprint. So it's absolutely fascinating, and it's right up my alley, because I get to put on my engineering thinking cap and think, okay, like what are the possible problems that we're going to run into? AT's already signed off and said that this is safe, but what are the operators? So the pilots, the maintenance technicians, the support trades in Winnipeg and Ottawa, like what are they going to be running into for certification issues and maintenance and procurement and life cycle management? What are these problems going to be later on down the road that we don't see now? And it's a very unique and a very interesting position for me to be in right now, and I absolutely adore it. Some of the projects I'm working on right now are new upgrades to the software so the F-18 can stay relevant and operational with the other military fleets in the world. I'm also helping out the Grove School out in Southport, Manitoba. So that's where the pilots that are, or the individuals that are streamed to become pilots in the military first go to get their equivalent private pilot's license. And I'm going to be going there sometime in April to help them certify their brand new parachutes that they're getting for their students.
Wow.
And yeah, it's really phenomenal. And then we have some other projects that we're going to be doing as liaison down in the States for more F-18 operational requirements. So I'm really excited, and this is definitely a really interesting time to be trying to travel and liaise with other organizations in light of COVID. So it's not anything that I've ever been trained to do. It's not anything that any of us have ever been trained to do, but we're just trying to make sure that we're taking a couple steps back. We're looking at the situation holistically, and we're just trying to find the best way possible to make sure that everyone can be safe, but still being able to maintain the objectives that we want to achieve when we're working with our partner nations.
Wow, like I am already blown away, and we haven't even got to Alida yet. I've met some pretty fantastic women in my life, and right now you guys are definitely like peaking the top. Like I am so proud of all of you, and I'm literally getting goosebumps hearing your stories. They're amazing. So I know, Amanda, you went kind of like the civilian to the military route. Alida, did you follow the same kind of path, or was your education a little bit different?
So my education was a bit different. Same as Amanda, aerospace engineer, joined the military as an aerospace engineer, but I applied to RMC. So right away, in grade 12, my father is in the military, a pilot, and I had glasses at the time. So I knew I couldn't be a pilot. So I said, okay, what's kind of like the next best thing? And my dad was the one that pointed me to the aerospace engineer direction. My uncle was also an aerospace engineer on the Sea Kings. So I spoke to a local one in Trenton that worked at my father's squadron, and she kind of gave me the lowdown on what to do, what to kind of look at. So we moved from Cold Lake in grade 11 to Trenton in grade 12, and right away, like I already had my application and gone to the recruiting center like by November. So like everything was kind of already done and in, and then early acceptance at that time was like January. So I didn't even apply anywhere else. I was already accepted to RMC, and I said, yep, okay, I'm in. This is what I want to do. I was accepted for aerospace engineering. Once I got to RMC, after first year, you can kind of choose your engineering. And grade 12 didn't exactly prepare me for engineering. So like, woohoo, you have like high 90s, but engineering is like a new thing. So that was a little bit tough in first year, got through it, but said, okay, like the aerospace engineering, most people had to take about 5 years to complete it at RMC. It was a new program. So I looked into civil engineering at the time. Engineering, regardless, is all you're required to be an aerospace engineer in the military. So I chose civilian engineering or civil engineering. And it was very interesting. Has nothing to do with my job, but proved that I could go get my degree in engineering and then proceed with the military training. So after RMC completed, I was posted to Cold Lake awaiting training. So like Amanda, I was working on the CF-18 in management positions for my training, awaiting the course in Borden, and then after Borden back to Cold Lake for another, I think 6 years we were there. We were just posted up to Yellowknife almost 2 years ago now. So that's kind of the short version of how it got to Yellowknife. In Cold Lake, 409 Squadron and 401 were one squadron, a super squadron. So we had 28 F-18s that we managed, and at the time we had one major and a captain, and I was the lieutenant. And when that major wasn't there, then it was just us two and all the jets. The war in Kuwait was going on, so we were getting our jets prepped to go overseas. Excuse me, and all our technicians as well. So we had about 200 technicians that we managed. We also had everything to do with NORAD, the QRA, which is the quick reaction. So if anything up north is going on, then that was up to our squadron because there was only one F-18 squadron. And then I was also involved in the split of the squadrons, 401 to 409, 401 and 401, 401 and 409. And after that, I went to AT, which Amanda kind of touched on, which is the testing establishment. And I did the same sort of thing as I did at 409, which was the management of the aircrafts, except at AT, they had helicopters, tutors, and jets. So it really gave me that broad range of experience, which is great for the military to move on to other careers. My spouse joined about 7 years ago. I've been in 12 years now and is a pilot. So we had to now be co-located. He was slated for jets and things got mixed up. So they canceled a bunch of pilots and they said, go choose something else. And I was on maternity leave with my second child and was like, hey, we need to like go find you an airplane to fly. So we called up the career managers. They said, okay, we have Yellowknife. I, at the time, didn't even know Yellowknife was an option. So that's pretty cool to get posted when I'd never visited the territory. So taking that opportunity to be posted to a territory was pretty cool. And he is now flying the Twin Otters at 440 Squadron. And I get the opportunity to work in a headquarters, which is very different than operational squadron, but also gave me so much more knowledge into like a broad air force that we work for and how the movement of everything goes on, which is very interesting. And right now I'm on my third maternity leave, so third baby, and that's why sometimes I'm listening upstairs to the screaming that's going on while I have my headphones on. So having babies, yeah, we've moved on from the 70s. You don't get kicked out of the military anymore, and you're supported and you're kept involved. So it's been a very, very good experience here in Yellowknife.
That's amazing. I'm like still blown away by all of you guys. This is so cool. We do have a question that came in. Anyone's welcome to answer it. What courses would you suggest to someone in high school to take if they're looking to get into aerospace engineering in university? Who'd like to answer that one?
I can go. So you definitely need your sciences and maths. So if you have the opportunity to take not just pre-calculus and chemistry, physics are a definite must. If you have the opportunity to take AP courses, that'll definitely be useful because university high school doesn't quite prepare you for the workload of university. So if you've at least seen what calculus looks like beforehand, then you're not like, oh my gosh. Because I was lucky enough to take calculus before getting to university, but I had some friends who didn't. And even just the difference in being like, oh, okay, I know what that squiggly line means, versus some of my friends who were like, I've never seen this before. So you definitely want to take any opportunity you have to take some of those advanced courses. And yeah, like I said, chemistry, physics, you want to definitely take science and math, but you also want to take, don't ignore your English class, because there is a lot of report writing. I originally thought, okay, cool, I'll go into engineering because English isn't my favorite class, but I love science, I love math. It'll be great. And then, you get to university and even in the jobs, like you have to write a lot of reports. So don't ignore your English.
Did you guys want to add anything to that, Amanda, Alida?
No, Rumbi really hit it all. The current high school curriculums, depending on which province you go to, they really don't prepare you for university anymore. So as much opportunity as you can to participate in advanced placement classes or AP classes, or even getting into some, like pre-university courses at local colleges. Like if you're serious about it, like it'll really help you out, because in university, professors don't wait for you. And sometimes your office hours with your professors line up with other lectures. So it just keep focused on your end goal. It can be very overwhelming in your first year. And we have this wonderful, wonderful resource called internet and YouTube that, people like my father, when he was going through engineering at University of Toronto, he didn't have access to. So there are tons of advanced mathematics and chemistry tutorials that you can find at your fingertips, either on Google or on YouTube, and they will break it down step by step and help you. So sky's the limit. Don't limit yourself. Don't put yourself in a box.
And I'll just add, like Amanda said, certain provinces. So the Alberta is standardized. So Alberta, you almost have a leg up. You might not get the highest marks, but you'll at least be prepared. So for example, in Ontario, I moved from grade 11 to grade 12. And in grade 12, they're like, oh, here you don't have to memorize these things. But in university, it was expected that I memorize that for calculus. And it had been given to me. In Ontario, it just depended on the prof or the teacher that you had. And they made up the exam. So really, it was very dependent. And in first year, really just reach out for help. I went to office hours at 5 a.m. before for calculus to ensure that I passed, and seek out friends that I've also had people that just will take the time and effort to teach you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think that that's some really solid advice for everybody listening. Hopefully that helps point them kind of in the right directions. Another question that has just come through, what are your typical hours like? Are you guys working 9 to 5? Are you working shift work? I see Amanda laughing, so, you know, whoever wants to jump in, go ahead. Tell us about, you know, run us through a typical day of work or a typical week.
Well, I can only speak to the military because that's my only work experience that I've had. But when you are in the military, operations take precedence. So it's not a typical 9 to 5. It's not even a typical 8 to 4 with breaks. You are at work for as long as it takes to make sure that your subordinates are properly resourced and they don't need any help through various deviations or devolved engineering authority authorizations. So that's just looking at it from the line maintenance side. And then, like Alida has touched on, with the NORAD mandate that the Canadian military is responsible to uphold, everything stops the second those bells ring. I have, no kidding, been at work for 18 hours. I have gone home. I have literally just crawled into bed and been almost asleep for an hour. And then my phone's ringing and I'm going right back into work and my day starts. So it really depends on the job that you're holding and what you're doing. Now in FOTEF, my days are a little more steady, but we're in a really unique situation now that we've kind of found our groove with COVID. We're having a lot of projects becoming assigned to the to my unit. So we're all trying to burn off the rest of our leave because we've been working shift because of COVID. So we maintain segregation among the crews so we can ensure that everyone stays safe and healthy. And now we're all working overtime just to try to make sure that we can keep up with the project deliverables and maintaining those project timelines. So it really depends. I know, Alida, you can add into this one as well. And then Rumbi, like, I can't speak to civilian industry, but I'm sure you'll have something very similar or completely different to share with us.
So I'll jump in with the family side of things. So yes, you can work long hours, but also if you have obligations, you have a child to pick up from daycare, there's always somebody else that is able to complete the job. So don't with my first pregnancy, I was in a very stressful job and didn't realize what stress could affect baby. And it got to the point where my boss was like, Alida, go home. Like, you need to take care of you. Somebody else will fill your shoes. So as much as you think it's all on you, we are an entire military. We all support each other. So if your spouse is on training or deployed, as long as your supervisor understands, the cat's gonna join us. So right now for me in headquarters, they can also find you jobs that kind of fit your family life as well. So right now it's a 8 to 4 job. And usually technicians will be shift work, either 7 to 3 or 3 to 11, etc. And then yes, your lunch, it's usually an hour, breaks occasionally, but like, say example, you have like your kid to go pick up at school and you want to kind of shift your schedule, as long as you and your supervisor are able to come up with a plan, or I have an appointment to take my child to, I'm going to work over lunch and then I'm going to leave at this time, etc. We are a very flexible military in that way.
Awesome.
Yeah. For the civilian side, it's similar to what Amanda described. It kind of depends on what role you're in. So I've been in a role where it was mostly modifications and some normal repairs. So that involved, mostly a regular day, but we'd have to plan tests, whether it was a ground test or a flight test, or even just having an opportunity when the airplane wasn't flying. So there's a lot of times where you do your regular workday, but then you'll go back to the hangar because that's the only time the airplane's in. The rest of the time it's flying, to go in, take your pictures, take your measurements so that you could do the drawings and the calculations that are going to come for that. I've also been in a role where I was sort of both operational and on the side of modifications and repairs. So the modification and repair stuff kind of went regularly. It was like, okay, if the airplane's in the hangar, I'd run out, I can take a look at it, try out, figure out the space. Sometimes it's like Jenga, trying to figure out where you're going to fit something in. So I needed to be at the aircraft trying to be like, okay, does it this way? How does it go? But then I also had an on-call shift. So it was 24/7 on call. And we, in the department I was in, rotated it once a week. So I'd do my regular work day, but then the phone could also ring at whatever time, and that was always repair stuff. So things happen to airplanes while they're out flying, or a lot on the ground. And that was a stop point. So it was like, okay, stop whatever you're doing, and then now you're responding to the operational issue, because at that point, the aircraft is grounded. It could be at the gate waiting for passengers. It could have passengers already on there. So the AME would be there, describing what the damage is, explaining that the repair in the aircraft manual doesn't cover it. So then they'd have to send me pictures and kind of would make a decision that, okay, how long do we think, do we think it can be repaired in a reasonable amount of time, so that they could feed that to operations, and know whether to try and do an equipment change or change the flight. And then if it could fix it, then I would have to basically go, okay, send me all the information you have, the measurements, take the pictures, design the repair, do the analysis to show that it was safe, whether it was, a hole through the fuselage or ground equipment ran into the airplane, which happens a lot. And show that, okay, we've repaired it and it's safe for flight. And that phone call could happen, in the middle of the day. It could happen at 8 p.m. after I think I'm done for my day, or it could happen at 3 a.m. So I got a few calls where, they wake me up and be like, okay, so we've got this and we're sending you the pictures, and can you take a look and see if this is something that we can do? So it really depends on the role that you're in, what your hours are. But for the most part, most of the aerospace engineers in civil will have like a regular hours, and then there's the like you're sort of expected to be able to adjust your hours depending on the project that you're working on, whatever you need to do, whether it's to chase the airplane so you can take the pictures, or if you're supporting operations and take phone calls in the middle of the night.
Awesome. So Rumbi, would you say like typically more or less you're kind of in more of a regular pattern than an irregular, or a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. And again, it really depends on the role. So the first couple of jobs I had, they were more regular. So it was easy to sort of predict, okay, the project I'm working on isn't going to require me to go chase the airplane. The airplane's going to be here like next week. It'll be in the hangar between 8 and 10 or whenever. So I could sort of plan that sort of stuff ahead of time. And then the last role that I was in before my current one, that one's the one that had an on-call shift where it could be like, okay, 3 a.m., there's some phone calls. So that one was good in that the weeks that I was on call, they were scheduled ahead of time. And so I could know, okay, well, that week I'm going to plan to be close to home most of the time, because I could get a call whenever and I need to be able to respond within a half hour.
Right. Cool. Really cool. So as far as the military goes, Amanda, Alida, would you guys say, more or less that they're really accommodating for women and families? Because based on what you're telling me, it seems like they've been, really there to support everybody getting through whatever they have going on with their family or outside of work, or having children, maternity leaves, things like that.
So it really depends on your supervisor. I've had very understanding supervisors, and I've had some that you have to work a little bit harder to explain your situation. And usually once they understand, or they weren't aware that you've been a single parent for a year while your husband's on flying training, and to get to that 7:20 meeting, you're at daycare at 6:55 a.m. waiting for it to open, and okay, I got stuck in traffic. Sorry, I didn't make it on that exact time. And for me to spend an extra $300 a month to get them there at 6:45, when maybe we could move that meeting to the afternoon. Is it really necessary to even have both officers at that meeting, etc.? And that was an example that happened in my my supervisor was like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay. And we were able to work it out that way.
You want to add anything to that, Amanda?
I think Alida really covered it off. In the last few years, the military has really started to take a more proactive stance with making sure that we're balancing family priorities with the members and the operational requirements of the job. And I think so far that they are doing a really good job. As Alida has said, it's very supervisor dependent, as really anything in life is. Not all people are completely understanding, but you know, it just takes a little bit of extra work and some patience and deep breathing just to make sure that individuals are understanding of your personal situations and that they're able to tap into that compassion that we have. I myself have been going through a lot of medical issues over the last year. So I've currently lost my aircrew medical. Everything is good, but I just need to have a nice long period of stability before I can get that back and I can go flying back seats. And I've been very fortunate to have a supervisor that is so understanding and very accommodating to the medical appointments that oftentimes take me away from work for a couple days at a time because I have to go into the city. So it's been absolutely fantastic, and I think the military is trending in the right direction in order to support their members and their families.
And when there are like circumstances that require like, I can't work this operational job because of whatever is going on, there are so many other different positions in the military that they're able to move you. For example, in Yellowknife, someone couldn't sell their house in Cold Lake. They posted them back to Cold Lake. A baby was born that required more medical attention. They posted them where there is family. So there's lots of opportunities in that farm as well.
That's really good to hear that, you know, we're kind of trending in the right direction as they should be, but it's reassuring knowing that they're there to support you guys, and, you know, how women and men have different needs. So it's important to address all of those things. And it's good to hear that it's been trending in that direction.
And when you take care of your people, then your people are able to work and perform to their highest capacity is really what it boils down to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You definitely got it there for sure. On this topic, someone actually has a question asking, do many of you work with other women, or is it mostly men, like most of the other aviation careers?
Mostly men.
It is
actually
mostly
in headquarters. It's probably more towards the like 40-60. There's a lot more women in like the headquarter positions. But in the squadron, we had maybe a handful of technicians out of the 200 that were female.
Now, like to that note, I myself, like Alida and I, we've been spaced out on squadron about 2 years apart, I think it was. And then since the time that Alida and I worked on squadron to now, there are significantly more women involved in the STEM trades. So like I can walk across the hangar floor and I can easily see, you know, like 20 female technicians. And, you know, like that's not even including the like the senior supervisors that are working in offices. So for me personally, as an engineer that's a female that's kind of grown up going to school being the, you know, like the black horse, and like one of 3 other young women in my classes, it's really amazing to see the trends, and that, you know, more women and girls are like, hey, like this is a career path that I love and this is accessible to me too. So it really warms my heart, and it makes me so excited for future generations to see that.
What about you, Rumbi? How about your career and job?
So I got lucky in that my first job, I wasn't the only female in the engineering office, which I didn't realize how rare and cool it was until some of my subsequent jobs where I've been the only one. You know, it's, even though there have been many times where, you know, we go on a technical trip and all the technical engineers and A&Es, and like, you know, there'll be 20 of us and I'll be the only woman there. It's still like everybody's still really like open. Like it's not like where everybody, like in the past, they would have been like, who are you? I mean, sometimes they'll still kind of go, oh wait, you're the engineer, but they'll get over it. Like it doesn't become a big thing. I would love to see a lot more women coming into, especially engineering. It's one of those background kind of jobs. Nobody sees it. Like everybody knows what a pilot does. Everybody knows what an AME does, what air traffic controller. They can see those jobs, but a lot of times the aerospace engineering, it's in the background, but it affects all of those, and people they don't see it, so they don't necessarily think to go into it. And I'd love to see a lot more women coming in.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? Like it's funny because when somebody says aerospace engineering, like for me, I think like, wow, like immediately I'm like blown away. I'm excited. I want to know more. So why do you think that there are so few women, you know, in your departments and in your careers? Like growing up, do you think that maybe something may have influenced you to take this career and some others not to? Like, what do you think is missing here?
Yeah, I'd say probably. So for me, I originally wanted to be a pilot, and like Alita, I didn't have the eyesight requirement for that. So I briefly thought, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer so I can go present an argument for why that's not cool. But I was lucky enough to have a lot of teachers who, especially my physics, my computers, and my math teachers, who said, you should look into engineering. So they knew that I loved science, I loved math, but I also loved the hands-on components. Like we got to shoot rockets in physics class, and that was so cool. And we got to build stuff, and I was like, okay, I like the science, but I like applying it. And it was interesting that, you know, I had a guidance counselor, and I had a class where I had male friends and we had the same grades. We had, you know, the same after school activities, but they got told, oh, you should look into engineering. And I got told, you should look into medicine.
Hmm.
And and I mean, luckily enough for me, I had teachers who saw what my interests were and went, no, you need to look into engineering, which was great because I hate needles. So that would never have worked out for anybody. But there is still, I think, a bit of people don't necessarily steer girls into going into some of these careers. And especially when they can't see or imagine what they are, there isn't anything to sort of steer them to, okay, go into engineering.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. I'd like to give Alida and Amanda the chance to expand on that because I think it's something worth talking about.
I was very fortunate. My father is involved in the aerospace industry as well. And as soon as I was able to start saying, I'm going to be an astronaut when I grow up, he's like, all right, girl, all the power to you. I'm gonna show you the way, like, and I'm gonna support you, but you have to work. I'm not doing it for you. And my mom was the exact same way. And so, like, I didn't realize until I had grown up and moved out onto my own that I had realized how fortunate I was to have that kind of support from my parents.
Yeah.
And like I had a very similar story to Rumbi's when in high school, like all of my after school curriculars, you know, like I was involved in yearbook and I was taking pictures because I love photography, I love optics, and you know, like I love writing just as much as, you know, I love my engineering. So like I didn't realize it at the time, but I was a very well-rounded student in the activities that I liked to do. I was involved in Girl Guides and Air Cadets, and all of my teachers, they only saw me doing yearbook and taking pictures and writing articles for the newspaper, and they were like, oh, you're going to Ryerson, you must be going into journalism or photography. And I'm like, no, I'm going to be an aerospace engineer. That's why I took all those advanced classes. And they're like, but you're good at that. And I'm like, but I'm better at this. And this is what I want to do. And like, this is my career path. So, you know, I was 17 years old and telling people who were, you know, like 29 to 42 that this is what I'm going to be doing. And this is my life timeline. And they're like, holy smokes, like probably thinking that like all the power to you, or, oh my goodness, this one's like going to end up in a loony bin. So I'm just really grateful that I had my parents supporting me every step of the way. And no matter what kind of pushback I started getting from guidance counselors and teachers, that they were able to be there. And like one event that I really remember that still sticks out in my mind and still like makes my heart wrench is I had gone to an aircraft technician's course in Air Cadets where I had learned how to take apart a jet engine and put it back together. And so I wanted to get a PLAR so that I could have my shop class, because like if I could do it for an airplane engine, how hard could a car engine be, you know? And then I was talking with my guidance counselor and he said, no, girls don't do that.
Whoa.
And this was in 2007. And it was like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, yeah, you know, just because you went and did this over the summer doesn't mean that you could do this for a car. And I looked at him, I'm like, pretty certain that a Tudor engine, you know, like the engines that go in snowbird aircraft that you see at air shows, a little more complex than a four-stroke, you know, engine that runs on the ground. So I just grabbed my books and I left without even like saying anything. The guidance counselor was a little miffed with my attitude and then called my parents. And then my dad's like, so what happened at school today, without telling me that the guidance counselor had called home. And I'm like, nothing worth talking about. And he's like, want to elaborate? So I told him. He's like, oh, okay, good for you. And I was like, what? He's like, well, your guidance counselor called me and said that you had an attitude problem, but good for you. Don't let anyone talk to you like that. And I was like, oh, daddy.
That's, you know what, like, hats off to your parents for doing that, because that's great. I'm blown away that that even happens. I mean, clearly there's a systemic problem and it needs to be addressed, right? So I hope that you took that pushback as motivation.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime someone tells me I can't do something, you can guarantee that I'm going to do it, just to throw it back in their face and say, I told you so. So it's, you know, a good quality, but it can also be a double-edged sword for me if I'm not careful to whom I apply that tactic with.
Yeah, there's a limit for sure, but I mean, it's good to take some things and use it as, harvest it as motivation, which, you know, all of you have clearly done, which is fantastic, which, you know, leads me to wonder, you know, Alida, did you feel any of those kind of things growing up? I know you had a military family growing up, so I feel you had quite a bit of encouragement, but that doesn't mean you didn't, you know, face any pushbacks along the way.
Yeah, so before I get into it, I also want to like say with me and Amanda, like having like supportive parents, we're also we also know that not everybody has that support to kind of encourage them to do that. And Elevate Aviation is a great tool, and we do have like military mentors. We have mentors in the civilian, lots of opportunities. So if you are interested and don't have that kind of support at home, there are so many people out there that'd be willing to have a conversation with you, call you, recommend this recruiting center. Oh yeah, my friend works there, I'll give her a call. Like I've done that for people. But yes, so my father taught at RMC for 6 years in the physics department, and I remember like looking at a physics one, marking it, and all the red X's, going like, what, why don't these people know the answers? And then I took first year physics and almost failed it, and was like, oh, that's why, it's really hard. Funny anecdote. But also just growing up, like I went in karate and I was really good at it, but like the boys made us do like 100 push-ups, so then I went back to tap dancing. Or I went to horse camp, but I wanted BMX, and they made up some probably rude nickname, and I went back to horseback riding. So like those kind of two incidents in my like childhood, kind of like growing up, and it's like, no, why is that so stigma? It doesn't need to be.
Yeah, and I think, you know, even just having this conversation and, you know, however many people it ends up reaching will definitely help, because it's all about starting a conversation, and, you know, you got to start the conversation somewhere. So even just having talked about different setbacks that you've had and looking at where you're at now is just, I'm inspired. You know, I almost want to go back and take physics, but I don't like physics, so I'm not going to. I'm good.
To jump on to something that jump on to something that Alida said about support systems. Like, I was lucky enough that my parents were thrilled when I switched from wanting to be a pilot to an engineer. They couldn't have been happier. Like, they were prouder of it than I am. So I had a really good support system, but not everybody does. One of the things that's also available on the civilian side is, you know, when I've been the only female engineer in my department, there are other companies around that have female engineers in the same thing, and you talk to each other, you form your support groups, you don't ever feel like you're the only, you don't have to feel like you're the only one. There's a group called Women in Aerospace, which has a lot of women who are working in aviation and aerospace, and you can come together, talk about your experiences. There's Women in Science and Engineering if you want to find out more information. And there's also just your engineering societies that regulate the practice of engineering that have, like this month is National Engineering Month, so they have a lot of activities that are explaining the different types of engineering that are out there as well. So there's ways to find this information and get support systems if you don't have that already.
Yeah, and you know what, thank you for mentioning that, because that's really good information for people kind of coming into the industry and getting to know different aspects of it. You know, women face different challenges than men, but it's also important, you know, that we note that this is a career for men as well. And, you know, I encourage just as many men and women to join. It's just nice to see kind of the numbers shift a little bit and have women being encouraged to do, you know, different trades in aviation and aerospace, right? Because there are so few of us. So it's important to start the conversation. We're coming down to our last 8 minutes. We do have another question from an anonymous attendee. It says, I always thought aerospace engineering meant you work with spaceships. I'm starting to think I am wrong about that. Is that a path someone could take in Canada? Go ahead, Amanda.
I would love to answer this question.
Perfect.
So aerospace engineering has become an amalgamation of aircraft and space industry engineering. So it includes both. This is definitely something that we can do in Canada. While we don't have NASA per se, where we're physically building spaceships, you know, like we have opportunities in the United States through NASA and through SpaceX. In Canada, we have a amazing space robotics community. A friend of mine who used to work in FOTEF is actually working for MDA right now. And for those of you that don't know, MDA is most famous for creating, producing, and then sending the Canadarm into space on the International Space Station with the space shuttles. So it definitely is an industry that we have able to tap into in Canada. And I do encourage you that if you do want to get into space, like just hang in there. We have the Canadian Space Agency. There are tons of positions available in mission control and actual engineering within the Canadian Space Agency. You just got to look on jobs.ca for them. And then, of course, there's also the American industry that you can get tapped into if you apply for an American visa or happen to have dual citizenship. So don't completely disclude that. I like to tell my friends that I'm an intra-atmospheric spaceship operator or spaceship engineer, you know, so I'm working on aircraft, jet aircraft. And even though we're not using a whole bunch of, gosh, now I'm completely forgetting what it's called. Even though we're not using rocket fuel, we are using kerosene, and these aircraft still do fly at supersonic speeds. So they may not be going outside of the atmosphere just yet. You know, like we don't have too many Concords or too many people that actually remember working on, or that have been able to say that they've worked on the Concords for years now. But don't limit yourself. Like, this industry has just become amalgamated just to encompass everything that we do inside the atmosphere and outside of the atmosphere. And there are tons of opportunities. And if you do want to get into space and robotics is something that you want to get into, tons of high schools actually have robotics competitions available and robotics clubs. So please, please, please get involved. Do not be intimidated because there's a bunch of boys there and you may be the only girl. You know, like, you bring a completely different dynamic to the team, and your brain just works completely differently in ways that a lot of other engineers just can't tap into. So don't discount yourself for that, and just be brave. Just do it. It's worth it.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that, and just aerospace programs generally will have you do both. So for me, I actually took a stream that was aerodynamics, propulsion, and vehicle performance. So I took rocket class, and my final year project was actually the space project where we were working on a satellite, and I worked on the propulsion of a satellite. So just because we're all talking about airplanes, in relation to aerospace, that's not all that you will learn or that you can do with aerospace. You can do both. You can do space. Like Amanda said, it's been amalgamated together, where it's spacecraft and aircraft kind of smushed together. And at one point it was called aeronautical. So a lot of people with aerospace degrees actually go and work with ships, because it's all about, you know, a body moving through air or a vacuum. And those principles, they set you up to work in lots of different areas. One of the cool things about aerospace is you learn so much that you learn how to learn. So even if you don't start off with spacecraft, or you don't see any opportunities, because like Amanda said, that we don't have quite as many in Canada, there are a lot of companies that are thinking about starting up, rocket launching for satellites in Canada. So you don't have to start there, but you could still end up there. So don't get discouraged. If you don't see anything right away, still go out, work in jobs where you'll learn to work, and you might still find yourself there.
And just to add on to what Rumbi said, like in Alberta, we have a very prominent oil and gas industry. And as an aerospace engineer, you take a lot of fluid dynamics and aerodynamics analysis, and that is directly transferable to the oil patch, because when we're analyzing and creating and generating pipelines so that we can get fewer trucks on the roads and find safer modalities in order to transport crude oil from where we're drawing it out of the ground to refineries, like you need to do that kind of fluid and aero analysis in order to make sure that you're not wasting energy in order to get your fluid that's transporting through those pipes from point A to point B. So the opportunities are just endless, and the sky is the limit, really. Like even space is the limit. Like don't put yourself in that box again. Like I know I keep coming back to that, but you can do anything you want to. And like Rumbi said, like you learn how to learn when you are tapping into these kinds of degrees and these kinds of industries. So don't limit yourself. Like anything is possible. And if you're halfway through your degree and you decide you don't like engineering and you want to go to medicine, that's cool too. That's like, it happens. People change their minds. They find new passions. So don't feel like you have to stick with it just to get to the finish line, just so that you can say that you finished. These are transferable skills.
Honestly, you guys are so inspiring. Like I'm inspired to go become an aerospace engineer right now. Like this has been one of the most informative and amazing chats that I've ever had with, really amazing people. So I'm really glad that we all got the chance to sit here and chat with everything. And I feel like I've taken a lot away from this. So I really hope that, our viewers have taken just as much, because I'm seriously like motivated to join the Army, become an aerospace engineer, take a physics class. Like this is awesome.
Air Force.
Yeah, Air Force. Sorry.
Air Force. Blue.
We're going to take one last question, and then we're going to have to say goodbye. The last question we have, I believe, is directed for Rumbi. Do you need flying experience to be a certification engineer?
No. So the funny thing is, my first job, actually all the jobs that I've been in, I have to write flight manual supplements and read through flight manual. Like I said, aerospace engineering, you're affecting everything you touch, affects some part of the system, and every part of the system is touched by an aerospace engineer, a certification engineer. So whether it's the pilots, they're reading a manual that's been written by or reviewed by a certification engineer. The flight attendant manual has been reviewed and approved through the regulations. The AMEs, all the maintenance manuals that they use that have gone through certification engineering. The service manuals that are used at the airport, the systems in the aircraft that are used to talk with ATC, those have all been reviewed by a certification engineer. So there's a wide range of experience and backgrounds that's required in certification engineering. So you don't have to be a pilot. And for me, it was kind of cool that I got to go on flight tests, even though I'm not a pilot. And I got to sit in the jump seat, and for a single pilot aircraft, I got to sit in the right seat, the co-pilot seat. So you still can get those experiences where you're working with pilots, but you don't have to be one.
Awesome.
So the short answer is no.
Perfect. Well, I would like to thank you ladies for sharing your experience and inspiring others. And, everything that you do is just amazing. I'm seriously blown away by all of you. You guys are all fantastic women. You lead a very, very exciting and interesting life. And I'm positive you guys have inspired many. Like myself, you've inspired me. So it's been really great. And if anybody has any follow-up questions that they'd like to ask, or if you had any other questions for someone on the panel and didn't get a chance to ask them, I encourage you to email us at info@elevateaviation.ca. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can, or maybe put you in touch with any of these women. They're all working together, and we're all here with Elevate Aviation. So if you need any help or guidance, please reach out. And that's pretty much it for the day. Unfortunately, I could sit here and talk to you guys all day. Like, I'm seriously so interested by this. Like, I'm into it. But unfortunately, we have an hour. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you guys once again and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for this opportunity. This was amazing, and I'm so grateful to see how many people are interested in aerospace and STEM. So go engineers, National Engineering Month, and remember, like, don't put yourselves in a box. Sky's the limit. You guys can do it. Just set your mind to it, and just amazing things will happen once you guys are, you know, putting yourselves out there and just giving yourselves the opportunity to learn and grow.
And thanks for hosting, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure. I feel like I got the most out of this. So, you know, I'm hoping that the audience gets even more. So it's been great, guys.
And
Thanks
it's been
again,
great getting
Lisa.
all the questions. That was really, really awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, you ladies have a wonderful day and we'll be in touch, I'm sure. Thank you to everyone watching.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.